3-cylinder Maruti Swift. Ugh, brother, ugh.
Just rock, just rock.
Let me begin this video with two important observations. First, yes, yet again ZigWheels has chosen to send its largest presenter for reviewing the smallest cars. The irony is not lost on me. And two, I feel like a lot of people are going to buy a Swift because a lot of people buy the Swift. I'll explain why later on in this video. But why we're starting off this review with the drive portion is because even though this is a new generation of the Swift, the one big change that truly stands out about it is what powers it. The all-new Z12 more efficient but 3-cylinder petrol engine. Yep, the trend finally got its grips onto the Swift as well. And I feel like this is a big deal for some important reasons. Most of all because a lot of people would have felt that these entry-level 1.2 liter petrol engines, it's very difficult to get them where they're at the optimum point of usability, and there are largely three engines that managed to set sort of decent benchmarks. One was Honda's IV Tech, the 1.2, the other was Hyundai's Kappa 1.2, and the third was the K12. The main differentiating factor was that all three of these engines gave you excellent refinement and a great deal of smoothness, especially if you drove them with their automatic transmissions back when all of them were offered with CVTs. The smoothness was butter, muska, malai, every word you could use. But the differentiator with the K12 was the fact that it offered you pep. It was fun to drive. Whereas with the other engines, you'd often land up having to rev the daylights out of them to extract what performance they had. That is why the Z12, it's a bit controversial. But how much of a difference has it really made to the everyday usability? So the fundamental question then, can you tell that this is a 3-cylinder engine? Yes, there's no getting around that. But I feel like the 3-cylinder nature is something that you observe in some very specific situations. For example, when you're driving in stop and go traffic, and I mean really slow traffic, at those points when you're getting in from bumper to bumper and you come to a dead stop, or you're trying to give that throttle to just get gently crawling, at those points you can feel a little bit of vibration coming in through the pedals, especially when the engine settles down back to its idle. The other extreme is when you're out on an open road like the one I'm on right now, and you push this engine. Yeah, it's not a 4-cylinder. It does not sound as good as a 4-cylinder. There's no getting around it. But that being said, this is still by far the best 3-cylinder engine I've driven ever. For two reasons. One, it actually sounds kind of good standalone. Not as good as a 4, but standalone still a decent, nice little bassy tone it's got. And secondly, they've managed to deliver a great amount of refinement in that mid-range where you're actually going to be driving for the most part. So it is an enjoyable engine. It is still as tractable, as friendly to use as the K12 was. So in that sense, they've managed to strike the right compromise here, that even though they've lopped off a cylinder, and of course now you're getting better fuel efficiency, at least in the claimed numbers, it is still not an engine that you're going to have any issues when it comes to usability. And I don't mean that just in terms of what it can do in the city. That's a given. It's a city car, it's going to do that fine. But even out on the highway, making overtakes, this engine doesn't expect you to rev the daylights out of it to access what performance it has. 2,000-3,000 RPM, you're pretty much sorted. And even if you're sitting at 100 kilometers per hour, in top gear, the car is sitting at about 2,500 RPM at 100 kilometers per hour, wherein traditionally this kind of engine you're sitting at close to 3,000 RPM. So the usability and efficiency, that characteristic of this motor, it's going to extend into the highway performance as well, which of course you can reap the benefits of on those few occasions when you decide to do an intercity trip or a road trip. Otherwise though, it still feels like the Swift, for better or for worse. The better bit, of course, being that the controls are incredibly light. Like the clutch is as easy to use as the AC controls are. The gear gates perfectly defined, easy to get through them. No real effort needed over there. The steering is light, weighs up just right when you want to get up to 80-100 kilometers per hour. So they've managed to get a package that is quite easy to drive, but also for those times when you find a good set of windy roads, because you're sitting nice and low, you get this driving position that's quite enthusiast friendly. It's a nice place to be in, and you get this just the right amount of surface reading from the suspension where it feels a little bit go-kart like, and that nature is essentially what made this a car that is not out and out meant for an enthusiast. I think that really hasn't been the case since the first generation of the Swift itself. But it is a car that you can have a little fun in. It has a sense of humor to it. Now the big question, between the manual and automatic, which one would I prefer? I don't even think it's a competition for me. I would put it plainly this way. If you want the convenience of an automatic for driving about in the city, get the AMT, it's fine. But it is an AMT. The shifts are not going to be the smoothest. You can feel the car going through each gate, and it feels like the AMT's nature is a little bit lazier than what they had done when they introduced it with the Swift originally. It's a little bit more laid back, and it felt like it was more fun before. So on that front, it is still a effective solution to give you that added dose of convenience. But if you want the best drive experience with the Swift, it has to be the manual. And the benefit being that even if you do have a lot of city driving, the controls are so light that it honestly doesn't become cumbersome. Broadly speaking, the AMT is just fine if you're looking for a basic city commuter. But it feels like that transmission, and given it's just that little bit of laziness that you get with that nature of an automatic, it does tend to amplify some of the drawbacks that you get with this 3-cylinder engine. And lastly, the ride comfort. Now this I'm not going to get too much into the details of, because we've been driving around on absolutely fantastic roads near Nandi Hills. So there's not much to complain about over here. All I can tell you is, sitting at 80-100 kilometers per hour, when you come across any odd undulations, some of those bad patches of road in between, it feels really planted, really confidence inspiring, and it's something that you can enjoy if you do decide to do those intercity trips. And on those few occasions where we come across fairly large speed breakers, potholes, the bump absorption is on point. It doesn't feel unnecessarily stiff nor too soft. So they've managed to strike a great balance of a car that is primarily tilted towards everyday usability and comfort, but it does give you that little bit of liberty, that lightweight and easy to use nature of the car itself, to make it a little bit of fun when you want it. Inside the Swift, there are a couple of things that are typically Maruti Suzuki and some things that are typically Swift. Let's talk about what's typically Swift, and that is, first of all, the driving position. There's such a long range of adjustment available with the driver's seat height that even someone who's as tall as I am, 6.5 feet tall, I can get into a nice, sporty and low driving position and just feel cocooned by the dashboard. Additionally, even if you are someone who's on the taller side, you'll find that even though this is, for all intents and purposes, a compact car, you don't feel cramped in here. With my driving position, and yes, this is my driving position, I don't find my knee getting anywhere near the dashboard. I can easily shift the controls, operate them, drive around in traffic with absolutely no issues whatsoever. My legs are stretched out just the right amount ahead of me, so I do have some amount of under thigh support. So if you're looking to primarily drive the Swift as your own car, just making your daily office commutes or dropping the kids off to school by yourself, it's a comfortable place to be in even if you are larger in size. And that also extends to the seats themselves. They're quite broad, they're quite large in size. So while I might be slipping out of these or spilling out of these seats just a little bit, I am of course the exception and not the norm. But for the most part, most people of an average build and height will find these seats to be very comfortable, very large in size, and giving them even the right amount of lateral support towards the side. So it's an extremely comfortable place to be in. However, that generational change that you would expect with the Swift has happened mainly in terms of the design, where they've managed to Baleno-fy the dashboard's design just a little bit, and that does come with some of the cons of the Baleno as well. A lot of people who were especially shorter in height, because of the Swift's infotainment console being integrated into the dashboard, it gave them a greater sense of judgment while looking in towards that corner. But now with the infotainment system plonked up on top, separate, freestanding from the dashboard, shorter drivers might find that judgment being compromised just a little bit. And otherwise, the design has become a little bit Baleno, a little bit more mundane, I'd say. Yes, it is different. Yes, it is good in isolation. But frankly speaking, if you were looking for the sportier looking dashboard to match the Swift's personality, I feel like that was done better with the previous generation. And for me, the biggest letdown with this cabin is the quality of plastics. Now, as always, I cannot fault this car for the kind of fitment quality. Everything is put in perfectly, smooth finishes, no issues, no loose bits, nothing coming off, none of that stuff, which is fair enough, especially given the price point the Swift is now available at. But the quality available, scratchy plastic, even with this leathery look for the plastic itself, the graining on it, there's basically no upgrade whatsoever since what you had before. And that is my problem, that it doesn't feel like a generational leap when it comes to the quality of materials that are available, even though it has taken that generational leap when it comes to the pricing on offer. And in that sense, the Grand i10 Neos continues to do a better job. On the practicality front, all the must-haves are in place. So the front door pockets are large enough to hold 1 liter bottles along with some storage space for microfiber cloths or some other things that you might want to place in there. There's 2 cup holders in the middle. There is a wireless phone charger, or it can double up as a storage space if you want it there. And the glove box is also sizable enough to hold your car's documents, maybe tissues and a handful of other things. Maybe your car perfume if you want to keep it handy as well. On the features front, you get a steering that is adjustable for tilt but not telescopic. You do have a driver's seat that is height adjustable as mentioned before, all 4 power windows, push button start stop, auto AC with rear AC vents along with a USB charging port up front and a 12 volt socket as well. There is a type A and type C charging port for the rear users as well. And a big highlight of the entire infotainment package of course is going to be the 9-inch HD touchscreen that does come with support for both Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Now usability wise, this is quite familiar. We've seen it on a long range of Maruti Suzuki, new age Maruti Suzuki products. It's quite straightforward, not really, a little bit messy at first for you to get used to, but spend like a day with it and you'll get the hang of it, no problem whatsoever. The sound system itself, not particularly impressive. It does feel like the sound staging is quite low down, so not all that enjoyable. But for me, the bigger problem is the placement of the infotainment system. It feels like the bezels towards the side are unnecessarily large, and if you hop into the lower variant that doesn't get this large screen, 9 inches, the empty space towards the side just makes you feel like, why? It feels like you're missing out on something. And this could have been just a little bit slimmer to make that experience look a little bit better. But the big highlight with this generation of Swift is the amount of safety features you are getting as standard. 6 airbags, ESC, 3-point seatbelts for all the occupants along with seatbelt reminders. And yes, thankfully the rear seats also have proper load sensors, so you don't have to keep them buckled up unnecessarily to avoid the warning going off. You have ABS with EBD, you also have rear parking sensors and a rear parking camera. But I have to say, the rear camera itself, the resolution of the thing could have been a lot better. It is a manageable solution but far from ideal. No dynamic guidelines either. As for the crash safety rating, let's wait for the experts to do that and not base it off this. Over to the back seat, and for obvious reasons I have employed the services of Nabil because there is no chance I can sit behind my own driving position. But we've set the driver's seat up to the height of 5'7", which is Nabil's height, and this is the amount of space he has available. So there's knee room to spare. There is adequate space for him to tuck in his feet underneath the front seat, and he also has headroom. By the way, even if I sit in the rear seat, the upper edge of my hair is just about scraping. So even though this is not technically a tall boy hatchback, the headroom available in the front and rear seats is actually quite impressive. As before though, because the dimensions haven't really seen much of a change, even with this generational change, it is a cabin that is ideally suited to 4 occupants. It's not especially wide. The real drawback though with this rear seat is the kind of shape that you have for the seat itself, that the backrest is rather upright, which means that even if you're of an average height, you'll end up having to slide a little bit further ahead in your seat, which lands up compromising your under thigh support. So it is okay for small families, but still there is a lot more that they could have done to make this rear seat experience feel a lot more family friendly. Not just the backrest, there is no middle headrest available. There is no armrest, that's also a miss in the Baleno. And I don't understand the cost cutting of putting a seat back storage on one side and not on the other. One more point to note is the visibility for rear passengers. Of course, with the switch of the door handle going back onto the traditional positioning onto the door panel itself, the visibility has improved a little bit towards the sides. But because this large seat, which makes it so great up front, has a large headrest, your visibility forward, it is a little bit compromised. So the black interior itself, not something that's going to make you feel claustrophobic in the slightest, but this can.
The usable boot space stays more or less the same as before. 2 to 3 cabin-sized trolley bags along with some soft bags will fit in easily, but larger suitcases will be difficult.
But honestly speaking, for me, the best part of the new Swift would have to be the looks. Yes, the design change is evolutionary. Not everyone would be able to tell that this is a brand new generation of the car in the first place. But the end result is still a car that retains that toy-like appeal. Especially if you get it in brighter colors like blue or red, this looks just as sporty, just as young as it ever has, and it's definitely one of the better looking cars that you can get for the kind of money. Up front, you'll spot these brand new headlight clusters along with these DRLs, LED projectors and fog lights. On top, you have the most distinctive factor of this Swift, which is the new bonnet design. The clamshell execution along with how it blends into the shoulder line makes it look like a little toy that you can pop open this way. The choice of wheel design for the 15-inch alloy wheels, bang on, looks absolutely right for this car. However, with a set of black alloys or even 16-inch alloys, I can't help but wonder rather how good this car would look with just that little bit of a change. And at the rear, you also have a slight distinction with how they've got the rear end looking, with the tail lights getting a smoked effect. So all in all, the car does look largely the same, just a little bit wider in its stance, but still sporty as ever. The best part is that even though the changes are evolutionary, they're still managing to deliver the Mini Cooper vibe even with this Swift. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of this video. I feel like a lot of people buy the Swift because a lot of people buy the Swift. There are a couple of things out there that become a byword for the kind of product that they are. In the same way that Maggi became a byword for noodles, Xerox became a byword for photocopiers, Activa became a byword for scooters, Swift became a byword for hatchbacks because of a legacy that is now 2 decades strong. And I feel like that is a major reason as to why Suzuki was a little hesitant to make any drastic changes with this car, including some that they should have made. The looks, they are evolutionary. We've seen facelifts with more drastic changes than this new generation car has. But the end result is this Swift does look youthful, it does look sporty, it does pop, and it is going to be a major reason why people will want to buy the Swift in the first place. The interior is plenty practical for small families, and even if you're someone who's tall or large in size and you want a solo drive, the Swift does make a good case for itself. The one place where I am quite disappointed is what they've done with the interior. The design itself could have been a little bit sportier, a little less mellow, like the one it's got right now, but that's not really the deal breaker for me. For me, it's the quality. There just hasn't been the kind of upgrade we should have seen with the Swift, especially considering the price point that this car is now coming at. The Z12 engine, yes, you can tell it's a 3-cylinder. It may not have the emotional appeal or enjoyment factor of the K12, but it is still not compromising when it comes to usability, tractability, and daily livability, while probably giving you better real-world fuel efficiency too, if the on-paper numbers are something to go by. However, the big question now comes up with the price of the Swift. And that is a sort of drawback with upgrading these small cars with more safety features, with more emission friendliness, that they reach a price point where it just doesn't feel all that value for money anymore. So the big question you have to ask is, does it make sense to spend that 7 to 11 lakh rupees right now, hold on to a car like the Swift for a duration of 3 to 4 years and then upgrade later on, or become a little bit flexible with your budget, maybe move up a segment, not making a big difference to the loan amount you'd probably be paying, and upgrade in advance? Yes, the Swift is a car that I would happily recommend. It's one that I would happily buy. It is a good looking, easy to live with and sporty car. But is it the most value for money way to spend your 7 to 11 lakh rupees? Probably not.